Chris Hensley is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member of FINRA SIPC, investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
The Houston Midtown chapter of the Society for Financial Awareness presents Money Matters with your host, Christopher Hensley.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters. I'm Chris Hensley. The time is now 10 a.m. We've got a great show lined up for you today. It is widely acknowledged that there is both an art and a science to financial planning. Technical knowledge, the science, is crucial to delivering the technically accurate advice to clients. But the best advice in the world is meaningless if the financial advisor can't master the art of delivering it in a skillful manner, leading a client to actually take action and improve their financial well-being. Yet despite its label as art, the reality is that how best to deliver financial advice can itself be subjected to scientific scrutiny, which is beginning to happen with the emergence of several financial counseling laboratories in educational institutions across the country. Our guest today is Derek Tharp, and we will be doing a deep dive into financial counseling laboratories. What are they? What is that concept? What is this all about? So please stay tuned. Keep listening. Derek will be joining us very, very shortly. But if you are a longtime listener, you know we always reserve the first few minutes to tell you just a little bit about what's going on in the Houston and the Gulf Coast area when it comes to financial literacy. We're here in the month of July, and as far as our financial literacy seminars that we have, there is one on July 26th. Now, this one is going to be student loan repayment strategies. And most of our financial seminars are open to the public. This one is going to be employer specific, so it's free to employers of Harris County, and it will be on the 26th from 12 to 1, so the lunch hour from 12 to 1. We're going to be talking about student loan repayment strategies, talking about goal setting, some of the options and strategies as far as consolidation, looking at forbearance, deferral, whatever your specific situation is, what are some of the options, or getting really creative about paying those student loan payments, repayment strategies back. And I know a lot of people, whether you are in the work world or you're still in school, are affected by student loans. With that, let's go ahead and get Derek on the line here. Derek, are you there?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, Derek is he is a research associate at Kitces.com. He's a PhD candidate in the financial planning program at Kansas State University. And one of the reasons that you're on the show today is that you had recently put an article out on the Kitces.com blog or website about how it's called How Financial Counseling Laboratories Will Change Financial Planning. Extremely interesting to me, so I definitely want to talk about that. But thank you once again for being on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Would you be able to share something about yourself, maybe outside of the bio, just to get listeners to know you just a little bit better?
Sure. Yeah. Well, like you said, I'm a researcher, and I'm in the PhD program at Kansas State University. Also work as a financial planner, so I've had experience working with people and helping them make good financial decisions, and that's sort of my passion.
Well, absolutely. Well, that's perfect experience for what we're about to start talking about here. And so, one of the things that you kind of start off with, well, let's dive into what exactly is a financial counseling laboratory.
Sure. So, a financial counseling laboratory is really, when people think of a laboratory, they tend to think of a room with people with white lab coats. They're conducting experiments. And in some respects, it's similar, but it's also different. A financial planning laboratory is going to be more like a financial advisor's office or maybe a therapist's office. They tend to have maybe a round table with some chairs by it, maybe some more comfortable chairs for, kind of like living room style furniture. You could sit down and just have a conversation in a comfortable environment. But one key that makes it a laboratory rather than just some room is that there's a way for unobtrusive observation of what's going on inside the room. So some places will use like a double-sided mirror. They might use cameras. They might have some other way so that the researchers or in some cases it's just trained professionals who are overseeing students who are training in the laboratory can actually observe what's going on so that they can make important observations, record data, or otherwise help the students they're training.
I love that. As a financial advisor, I think more than ever, a good percentage of what I do when I work with people for retirement income or pension or whatever it is becomes financial counseling or a lot on the behavioral side. And I don't think that a lot of people realize how much is going on when it comes to that. One of the things in the article that you talk about is that the art of financial planning. How would you describe delivering financial advice to be an art? Why isn't it an art?
Sure. Well, I'd say it's really an art because there's no one way to do it. There's no, unlike something mathematical where you're generating the financial planning results and maybe there is a true mathematical answer. So we might say that that's the science side of it, something that there is a correct answer to. With the actual delivering of financial planning, communication, coming up with strategies that are going to help clients make good financial decisions, it truly is an art. There just isn't a one true way that it should be done. We're trying to apply some more scientific rigor to communication and counseling of clients so that we can find out what works, what doesn't, how do we help people more effectively. But the reality is when we know so little about how the counselor actually influences the client and helps them make good decisions, it really does just come down to an art that people try and hone their skills on and develop over time.
Now, one of the things you talk about when you're talking about the financial counseling lab is the atmosphere in the lab itself. Can you talk a little bit about what that atmosphere is like and how it versus maybe a traditional setting in an advisor's office?
Sure. So it is much more comfortable and relaxed. So you might think of it more truly like a therapist's office or a counselor's office. And there's actually been some research that's been done that's found that actually creates a more comfortable environment that are more effective for clients. So there's, again, we're in the very early stages of that research, but there is some evidence that supports that. And there's another reason why that's kind of been how things have developed, and that's within the universities where we do have some of these financial counseling clinics, financial therapy clinics that are actually producing on-campus financial counseling laboratories. A lot of times there's a historical connection there to maybe a marriage and family therapy program, some other type of counseling program. And so for a much longer time, those types of programs have been on college campuses, working in a laboratory setting. So some of it's just kind of a natural carryover from that relationship as they've noticed, hey, there's some application here for financial counselors, financial advisors, people who are working with clients. But at the same time, there is some evidence that suggests it's actually a better environment than, say, going to a financial advisor's office where the clients might be sitting on one side of the desk and the advisors on the other side of the desk, and there's maybe a big monitor there with some technical stock information and maybe CNBCs on a TV on the other wall, and that just is a more typical financial advisor's office rather than sitting in a comfortable chair across from the client or at a small round table where you can work together on documents. But it does seem like that's a more comfortable environment for clients, and there is that connection historically to the counseling and therapy programs that are out there.
So I like that, the idea of the universities, not necessarily clinical, but when you think of the counseling aspect of kind of a marriage of of those fields and the financial planning, and you talk about people being more comfortable and relaxed. I know if a client comes in and sits across from you at the table, it's more of an adversarial role versus if you guys are sitting together at a small round table and collaboratively working, and so it sounds kind of along those lines. I wanted to backtrack just a little bit because when you were talking about an art, the way I think about it is my wife had gotten braces when she was younger, and one of the orthodontists that she saw later, the orthodontist left a bracket on her teeth, and they said, well, we're not going to work on it because that was somebody else's work. And when I get clients that come in from other financial advisors, there is definitely a subjective, everybody's got a way that they do things, and so that part of it is subjective. It's not, there is the number side of it, but when I think of the art part of it, there's not necessarily a right or wrong. There's different ways that people will come at the same problem or the same solution. So kind of sidestepping there and getting back to the laboratories, can you tell us about some of the actual implementing of some of the financial planning recommendations that have come out of this study?
Sure. And so there's a series of studies that have been done. These aren't actual studies that I have participated in one of them, but not all of the research that's out there. But there's a few different well-known studies among financial advisors. One of the first ones is on client stress and the physical office environment. So that one gets to a lot of the things that I was mentioning before about how a therapy-style office actually can reduce stress for clients. So there was a study that came out of the financial therapy clinic at Kansas State University, and those researchers found that meeting with clients in a room with a couch and an armchair actually created less stress than a more typical environment of sitting at chairs around a table. So that would actually be comparing more the small round table with chairs. It's even more, less adversarial than sitting on the other side of the desk. But even moving that to more of a living room style furniture setup did reduce client stress. And that was found to be important because lower levels of stress can increase the client's ability to build trust with an advisor. And we know that trust is very important when you're dealing with something as serious as your finances and saving for retirement. So being able to help build that trust, foster that relationship is good for both the client and the advisor. But particularly looking at the impact for the client and how that helps them achieve their financial goals by being able to have that professional that they trust and they can share the information with that the advisor truly needs to be able to give them the advice that's going to help them the most. A few of the things they found in the office environment there were also to add kind of naturalistic features to the office environment, such as plants. That was something that helped reduce stress. They recommended using neutral wall colors and maybe playing soft, non-lyrical music in a waiting room. Again, we can contrast that to a lot of times when we see CNBC or financial market information in a waiting room rather than just something that's kind of calm and relaxing. And then also they recommended minimizing any physical barriers between the client and the advisor. And so in the more traditional sense, this would be the desk that the advisor's on one side and the client's on the other, and there's this barrier in between the two of them. Another study has been looking at helping clients actually implement financial planning recommendations, or I guess you could look at that another way is just how do you actually take action, and what types of interventions might help. And that was a 2016 study that was published in the Journal of Financial Therapy. Lance Palmer, who's a researcher at the Aspire Clinic at the University of Georgia, along with his co-authors, did an investigation into using a solution-focused brief coaching therapy technique. So again, this is another thing that has come over from the therapy side of the university, this solution-focused brief therapy or brief coaching. And they applied those techniques within an actual, it was people who were getting assistance preparing their tax returns. And so they would do the tax return work, and then they would actually watch a video that provided a solution-focused brief coaching session for them. And that was the group that was receiving the treatment. There was a control group where they wouldn't receive that same treatment, or they would receive a different treatment, so that the researchers could actually test, was this approach that comes from therapy actually effective at all, or maybe it wasn't. So at the end of the session, each client was then asked 3 questions. Did they save part of their refund today? How did they save part of the refund? And how much of the refund did they actually save? The results strongly supported that the solution-focused brief coaching technique actually did have a statistically significant difference in whether the client saved and how much they saved. So this is a very interesting finding for people who want to help people make good financial decisions, because in an environment where they were actually able to control and test against a control group who didn't receive treatment or received a different treatment, they actually found that they could encourage people to save more, and that's really good news from somebody's perspective who wants to help people.
Absolutely. Derek, on this, there's a large connection point with me here, because I'm also part of the Houston Money Week leadership team, and that's kind of it's a group of nonprofits and for-profits that do financial literacy here in Houston, and many of our partners are part of the United Way, and they're also part of VITA. They do the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program here in Houston. Mm-hmm. And so I know that a good portion of the VITA are low to moderate income, and what a fantastic group to reach out for. This was the first intervention, and you mentioned, kind of just unpack some of the stuff that you were talking about, a video-based solution-focused coaching, and where that solution-focused came out of the counseling side of the school of thought, as opposed to the financial side, or kind of a marriage of those two. That was one of the interventions. Can you tell us about maybe a second intervention that was done during some of these? Sure.
So they did have a cashless matching incentive. So that intervention they called the 10% Club, and basically clients who save at least 10% of their tax refund into some type of long-term savings account, could have been a U.S. savings bond, an IRA, or a CD, were offered a discount card to a local business as part of that cashless matching incentive. And that card would provide various discounts, maybe 10% off or buy one, get one free type of deals. So they were trying to create an actual financial incentive to save more. So you could think of it almost in some ways like a 401k match, or some type of way that the participant could actually benefit financially from saving.
Oh, that's huge. I know quite a bit of these, at least with the VITA people, that they'll end up going to like an H&R Block or something like that. They'll spend money on having tax preparation, and then a lot of times they'll pay fees to have it rapid refund and stuff like this. Not only are they able to get their taxes done, but they're getting some guidance or incentive to not waste that refund, to put it aside. That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and one of the interesting findings that did come from the result was they tested that video. They tested one where the participants only received the discount card if they were part of the 10% club, and then they actually tried a third intervention that would be where they offered the discount card and the video, and surprisingly, the discount card and the video was actually the worst outcome of any of the groups. So even worse than the control group and worse than doing any one of the two independently. And the researchers weren't exactly sure what to make of that, but one guess they put forward was that may have actually, it could have meant that giving people too many choices just made them feel like, I don't know what to do. Or it's possible the combination of the two made them feel like it was some type of sales presentation, and then they just felt like, no, maybe I should stay away from this.
And that's so that's a surprising result, but it's nice when you have the metrics to see that instead of repeating the same thing that's not working. And so that is, I kind of thought the same thing, like maybe if they're getting too many choices, like an overload of choices. Well, let's kind of switch a little bit and kind of pivot to another part of your article that you talked about was brain activity and the CFP designation. What is that about?
Sure. So that's one more that this research actually came from Russell James, who's a researcher at Texas Tech. And this wasn't necessarily in the same type of laboratory environment I described before, where it's actually that office type environment. This one, because they're researching brain activity, would have been conducted in a room with an fMRI machine that could actually get the data that the researchers needed. But in this study, they played, the participant would go into the fMRI machine, and they would be run through a series of different market kind of scenarios, and they would actually monitor the brain activity while they were doing that. But what the participant was tasked with doing was to hire a financial advisor to manage their investments for them. And it turns out the actual sequence, the performance the advisors provided, those were random. It didn't matter what the participant did, who they chose. But some of the advisors in this study were CFP advisors, and others were not. And they found that, on average, the participants did select the CFP advisors about 62.5% of the time, and that rate was similar whether the market was going up or going down. But they did find that advisor switching, so moving from one advisor to another, was much more common during poor performance. So nearly 75% of all the switches occurred during that. And they also found that statistically significant brain activations when using a non-CFP, there were differences when using a non-CFP versus using a CFP. So the researchers suggest that may be an indication that specifically where that activation was occurring is a region that's been found to be associated with error detection, and particularly error detection within another person. So, in other words, what they think that may mean is that when a non-CFP experiences underperformance, the participant may be more questioning of them than they would when they're working with a CFP who they know has some professional experience and credentials and has passed a certain test to demonstrate their expertise.
Okay, so if there's any financial advisors listening, this is an incentive to finish your CFP. I'm in the process of working on my RICP, but this is you actually the study was done, and these people were put through this fMRI, and you could see the brain activity, those parts of the brain light up, and there was a simulation with a stock market game, and some of the choices they had, the CFP. So that's definitely, I would say, if that's not a red flag, that's a flag. Listen up, advisors. Well, yep. One of the other, can you tell us a little bit more about? Well, I'm sorry, I want to switch a little bit because this is something that's come up a couple of different times on the show, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about the Financial Therapy Association. That came up in your article, and during the podcast version, this association has come up multiple times. Can you tell me a little bit about how that plays into this?
Sure. Yeah, the Financial Therapy Association, it's one of the newer financial associations that's out there, but it actually plays a big role in this type of research in several different ways. One, the Financial Therapy Association publishes the Journal of Financial Therapy, which is really one of the academic journals that's most open to some of this research that just by the nature of it's going to be done with either fairly small samples or experimental methods. And those can be harder for academics to publish in some journals, so it's great that there's a resource out there that will publish that and that can help disseminate that research to the financial services industry. It also plays a role in that it's a great community of different researchers and advisors and counselors and people who just all share this interest in helping people make good financial decisions. And so advisors or researchers or anybody else can get involved, and it's just a good sort of melting pot of different people with different perspectives on the topic so that they can come together and share and collaborate and hopefully provide many more insights in the future.
Absolutely, Derek. I love it. I love the whole article. Everything that you kind of dived into here is good stuff. We're bumping towards the end of the show. We got just a few minutes left. If I was to ask you, and this is kind of if I was to ask you what you think from your experience as a financial planner and as a researcher, some of the biggest roadblocks for people who are trying to be financially successful are, what would you say those are?
I think definitely what we've seen in the research and what I've seen from my own practice is that it comes down to behavior change. You kind of touched on it earlier as well, but we all know there are things we can be doing better financially, but the trick is a lot of times we just don't get around to it. And there's kind of an unfortunate dynamic in that, like dieting or eating better or any types of other hard behavior changes to make, the cost of waiting one day is often in the long run fairly small. It's if I start saving tomorrow or 2 days later, it's not going to make a big difference. But the cost of never starting is huge. And so that dynamic where it's always somewhat rational to wait one more day to get started with that behavior change, but very detrimental if you never get started, really makes it tough for a lot of people. And so it's finding ways that either you yourself can hold yourself accountable to financial change or somebody else can help you do that is the trick, I think.
Well, Derek, thank you so much for joining us today. For listeners who'd like to find out more about you, I found you on the Kitces.com website, which is an industry website for financial advisors. Where else can we find you out there?
Oh, that'd be a great place. Also, www.conscious/capital.net is my firm's website, or LinkedIn or Twitter. Any of those places, I'm on there as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And Derek, have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
And you have been listening to KPFT Houston.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Money Matters Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, visit us on the web at www.moneymatterspodcast.com. Drop us a line on SpeakPipe on the right-hand corner. It will receive any voicemails, questions, thoughts, concerns that you have about the show. In addition to this, we recently launched a Patreon campaign. Click on the Donate Now tab to hit the tip jar and find out what Patreon's campaign is all about.